Okay, so today we'll make a double presentation on Ange, Jacques, Gabriel, and on Helmut Jahn. They are both connected with this day, with the 4th of January, but of course in a different year. So Ange Jacques Gabriel, he died on the 4th of January, 1782, but he was born in October, 1698. He lived for a long time, 84 years. He lived actually longer than Helmut Jahn, who died at 81, riding his bike last year in Chicago. So Ange Jacques Gabriel was the principal architect of King Louis XV of France. So Louis the 15th, not the 14th. The 14th is the more famous one. King, the Sun King, King Le Roi, Le Soleil, but Louis the 15th, a little bit less known than Louis the 14th. Anyway, his major works included the Place de la Concorde in Paris, of course, the École Militaire, again in Paris, and the Petit Trianon, an opera theater at the Palace of Versailles. His style was a careful balance between French Baroque architecture and French neoclassicism. Well, maybe for the French spirit, these apparently conflicting tendencies are not so difficult. But if we are to take these words ad literam, the Baroque is very different from the classical or neoclassical. They represent different temperamental dispositions, so to speak, and to be able to marry the two is not easy, and yet apparently Ange Jacques Gabriel was able to do it. Here he was, looking like an architect, if not a king. Today, even a king would not have the nerve to look like this. Can you imagine what a difference? I mean, can you imagine an architect today looking like this? No way. I mean, no way, not even a star architect. Impossible. The world changed. Of course, there are wigs in the present too. You can purchase wigs if you are interested to purchase them. But who would wear them? And look at the attire and look at the gesture with his left arm and left hand. That's not the typical posture of an architect today. Frank Gehry, quite the opposite, photographed himself in a almost antithetical gesture. But anyway, this was a different time, a different story. This man had a king behind him, none other than Louis XV, and so I guess he had a high level of self-confidence. Here he's more, he looks like a sensitive man, almost, sentimental. Anyway, still dressed romantically. Again, why is it architects today do not dress in a similar, artsy way, so to speak? Why shouldn't we wear such scarves around our necks and look at his vest, with a nice arabesque motif, and so on. The times changed. Some drawings by Ange Jacques Gabriel. Well, this is not perhaps very romantic. This is rather neoclassical. Maybe whimsical are the heads of those animals, left and right. Why did they do this at that time? Why is it we don't do it? Although there are some hints in this direction. If we are to think of Moon Hoon, the very interesting South Korean architect. At least he employed the service of two horns in one of his very contemporary and provocative buildings. Anyway, Coupe de Même Fallon. You see, try to remove these so-called unnecessary things from the building or the ornaments inside, and what do you get? You get present-day architecture. That's what you get. But he was not just indulging in Baroque fantasies. He was able to structure. Look at this. This is a clearly defined neoclassical planning. And yeah. Now let's look at this work. The Place Louis XV in about 1775, as it was painted by a painter. This was actually the future Place de la Concorde. Apparently, when Madonna, the singer from the United States, visits Paris, I don't know if she still does, but probably she does. She rents some space, probably not the smallest, in this building on the left, in Place de la Concorde. The Louvre is on the right, and then on the left, Champs-Élysées, and then l'Arc de Triomphe, and so on. But this is, I guess, the Seine. What else could it be? The river. And on this side of the river is Quai Anatole France, and also a very nice museum done by Gay Aulenti, and then l'Académie Nationale on the left. And I'm a little bit nostalgic because I used to live in a building from where perhaps this picture was taken. I was renting a small room, a chambre de bonne, only 5 square meters on the 7th floor, and I used to walk up 7 floors because there was no elevator. Anyway, enough with the nostalgia. The Place de la Concorde. Place de la Concorde. Here it is. Here we can see, I'm joking, Madonna. So she rents, always I read, she lives in this building, which was designed actually by Ange, Jacques, Gabriel. Here we see the Pantheon, where, important cultural figures of France have their own Domus Eterna. I don't know who designed this building, but they are identical. Maybe the word identical is not too ambitious. Apparently, even Josephine Baker, who seduced or softened the hearts of both Le Corbusier and Adolphe Loos, she was an entertainer, so to speak, from the United States. Recently, was she, she was housed in the Pantheon. She was invited after death, of course, to this very famous, place for eternity for those who mattered in France. I think even Voltaire is there. Anyway, yeah, again, Place de la Concorde. Some people made fun of this obelisk, which apparently found its way to France, of course, from Egypt. And it was donated, I think, to the French by the Egyptians. And, Georges Bataille thought it was a ridiculous, thing to plant this Egyptian obelisk in the center of Place de la Concorde. Anyway, opinions, and so on. Yes, it's an architecture of prestige, of course, in the very heart of France, of Paris, and the so-called classical columns can only be of help in such a case when it is the question of prestige. Order, but not a severe order because of the lyricism in a way, if I am to call it so, of the Baroque that is brought into play together with the neoclassical scheme. So, Ange, Jacques, Gabriel in Place de la Concorde. Well, this is not the Pantheon. So, you know, this building was replaced by what we see today. And then here is the entrance to the right into Le Jardin des Tuileries, where André Le Nôtre, the genius landscape architect, was active. And then as you move forward to the right, you arrive at the Louvre, at the celebrated glass pyramid of IMP, which I don't admire so much. And then on the left, Champs-Élysées and so on. And recently there was a project published on, I forgot, the Zine or Arch Daily, where Champs-Élysées were transformed into some kind of pastoral boulevard, totally taken over by green, by bushes, by grass, by trees. I think it would be a nice idea. Okay, again, Place de la Concorde, the Pantheon here, and then the building by Ange Gabriel, and this one, I guess, I'm not sure. I don't think he designed this one, but they are the same architecture. He might just as well have designed both. They're identical. Now, Gabriel's plan for the École Militaire. École Militaire, the military school. Here it is. And military it is indeed. You know, if you had any doubts, it's strange. You know, the French have the reputation of being romantic. The French also brought to the world liberté, égalité, fraternité. The French burned down Bastille, but they also have, I think, an obvious reverence for authority, for king, for le roi, for the centralized power, and this is shown in the very planning of Paris. All the avenues converge towards l'Arc de Triomphe. Then what about the planning of Monsieur Haussmann? It's a strange duality that the French have. Maybe it is true they are somewhere halfway between the Italians and the Germans. Maybe. Anyway, like the École Militaire, the military school, another solid, you know, building, but it's not really, you know, dwarfing. It's not really arrogant, but it tells you that you shouldn't play games with the École Militaire, I think. Yeah. Well, in this picture, the École Militaire is even more emphatically École Militaire with the, you know, with the tower by Monsieur Eiffel, you know, behind it, right in the axis. So you won't miss the meaning of it, right? Now the chapel of Saint Louis. Saint Louis was a very interesting saint. I'm not an expert in history, but somebody told me that Saint Louis is he epitomizes justice. That's why Saint Louis, the portrait of Saint Louis is present in most palaces of justice or courtrooms in France. And this is very interesting. Apparently, he distributed, you know, justice. You know, alone. He didn't need the army of lawyers of today, like in the recent Palace of Justice built by Renzo Piano in Paris. I actually wanted to take part in that competition myself, and I did have a bizarre idea. Well, Renzo Piano won the competition and built it, and in my opinion, an outrageous way, he built a huge building in Paris serving so-called justice. But I guess he didn't have choice, because the program was almost surreal. The building was supposed to receive, if I remember correctly, either 11,000 lawyers a week, or 11,000 lawyers a month, or 11,000 lawyers, but this is hard for me to believe, a day. Anyway, we are talking about the industry of justice, the industrialization of justice, like we industrialize everything: film, music, justice. This chapel for St. Louis is quite nice, and these people are listening. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. I hear a noise in the background. Thank you. Unless you want to say something. Thank you. This is a chapel, but it doesn't look too sacred, the space. It's a large space for gathering, and at least it's not serving sacrality in the out of fashion way in which Byzantine mentality might think of. Now, the west facade of the Petit Trianon, here it is. Those who are against symmetry should not look at the picture, because it is perfectly symmetrical. But what can you do? In the past, before the arrival of the much celebrated modernity, people loved symmetry. And Bruno Zevi would have been unheard of, some centuries ago, because Bruno Zevi was the one who stated very, very, very clearly that modernity cannot be symmetrical in any way in architecture. I'm not so sure about it. There are modern architects, there were modern architects who did use symmetry, and not just myths. So, Le Petit Trianon by Ange, Jacques, Gabriel. I don't know how the word, the name Ange, I think, is quite frequent, and in other languages as well, Angel, Angelo, Angel. But what I don't understand is how people sometimes give, in my opinion, strange names to their dogs. Like Adawando naming his dog Le Corbusier. And I work for a Japanese man in New York who named his dog Buddha. But I really have a hard time, if I had a dog, to call that dog Jesus. I don't think I could do it. Maybe I am old-fashioned or too timid. Anyway, aerial view of the Petit Trianon and its small park. What can we say? This was a world in which the fluidities of Zaha Hadid would not have been conceivable in any way, not to speak about the so-called dances of Frank Gehry in Prague. No, this was a stable world, or at least this was the appearance that it was a stable world. There was a king, and the building reflected this stability, not instability. The Royal Opera at Versailles. So the Royal Opera House was first an idea of Louis XIV. The Sun King wanted to give his palace a concert hall that could accommodate the luxurious decor needed to host shows with machines, which he was particularly fond of. Unfortunately, none of the designs presented by his architects really pleased Louis XIV. It was his grandson, Louis XV, who let his architect develop his project to build a perfect theater. The Royal Opera House is one of the greatest works by the architect Ange Jacques Gabriel, who died on this day, the 4th of January. Inspired by the finest Italian halls, it was the largest concert hall in Europe when it was inaugurated on the 16th of May, 1770. And here it is, and great it is, and great it was. And I am not playing games with words. I think it is great. I don't know about the chandeliers, but even they are okay, you know. But the space, you know, it's truly. I mean, this is a theater built by a king for a king, that is for himself, and by the architect of the king. So things are not undecided here. Look at this. You know, it's truly you know a space where you do feel you know it's hard to feel a proletarian in this space. Now in this space, once you arrive there, you probably feel you know in touch with the lucky stars of the universe. Ange, Jacques, Gabriel. Now the foyer of the Royal Opera itself, you know, rather pleasant. If I am to use a subdued word, um, what can we say? A different world. Now, the Royal Opera during the celebration of the marriage of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette from 1770. Sorry, you know, the picture it is as it is, not too much color, but you can see people there didn't have a pandemic at the time, so there was no social distancing nor masks, I guess, although they laughed, you know, carnivals and so on. What can we say? You know, a marriage for royalties. Now, the royal box. Let's use our mortal eyes to glance at the royal box. Um, yeah, you know, I don't think you can, you would be accepted, you know, to be in the royal box in shorts or just descending from your bike. The stage of the Royal Opera. Uh, well, the building was built in the 18th century, but the decor is, you know, belongs to us, to the present, to modernity, if we are to call it so. The pavillon Butard, le pavillon du Butard à la Selle Saint-Claude, another cubistic, cubical building saved from stringent cubism by touches of the decoration, but nothing abundant. No. And yet the building shows clarity of conception, which belongs in a way rather to neoclassicism than to the Baroque. I always like this kind of drawing, architectural drawing, where you simply, you know, trace the lines from the plan right to the elevations, and you rotate the drawing to see the, you know, to see properly the elevations. It's fine. It's fine. Place de la Bourse, Bordeaux. So we are away now from Paris and its vicinity, and Bordeaux. Not bad. You know, not bad. So he built, you know, important buildings in Bordeaux as well. Ange Jacques Gabriel, the architect of Louis XV, was the nephew of Louis XIV, not his son, his nephew. Uh, what else do we see here? Sorry about that picture. You know, calm people, you know, crossing the square. And yes, the royalty brings in some stability, even if just in the imagination of people. But the imagination is important too, I guess. Einstein thought that imagination is even better than knowledge. He valued a lot imagination. Unfortunately, many architecture schools do not value so much imagination. They think it is dangerous. Well, it is dangerous, but as Friedrich Nietzsche said, live dangerously. That is, live in an imaginative way. And for creativity, imagination is paramount. You can do without. So the water mirror, this is I love these pictures, because, okay, we have kings, we have queens, we have, all kinds of, authority figures. But here we have the freedom of, and this is something nice about our age. I don't know if this would have been so easily possible. Certainly not this kind of attire for a young lady. But, modernity has its own beauty in its unconventionality. So I like this. I like this as well. What I don't like is these sites from where I took this picture, destroy the picture with their, logo. But otherwise, it's kind of nice, you look at this picture and you look at these people, some tourists, some, I don't know, and then behind you have the imposing buildings of Ange, Gabriel and his king. But these people are, of our time, and there is something actually uplifting about time as well. There is less pomp, there is more naturalness. That's nice. Anyway, now let's go to a different, well, maybe not so different, but living in a different time. Helmut Jahn. Helmut Jahn, who is also connected with this day, the 4th of January. So he was born today. So happy birthday, Helmut Jahn. We are very, very, very sorry that you fell from the bicycle last year and you died on the 8th of May 2021. So Helmut Jahn, born on January 4th, 1940, and he lived until May 8th, 2021, was a German-American architect known for projects such as the Sony Center on the Potsdamer Platz in Berlin, Germany, the Messturm in Frankfurt, Germany, the Thompson Center in Chicago, One Liberty Place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, formerly the tallest building in Philadelphia, and this airport in Bangkok, Thailand, among others. His recent projects included 50 West Street. We are going to see this project at the end of the presentation, a residential tower in New York City in 2016, and the ThyssenKrupp Test Tower in Rottweil, Germany in 2017. This was the man. And this is what he said: I strive for an architecture from which nothing can be taken away. I don't know very well what to think about this statement. In a way, it is true. You create a whole, and it's like, you cannot take anything away from, let's say, a human body, or even a tree. Although in the case of trees, we often dismember them, unfortunately. But so there is truth in what he said, that an architecture building should have a unity between every parts, and every parts create the whole, and the whole is expressing those parts. You cannot sever a certain part from the whole. I understand, but I wonder, how would an architecture be which, even if you remove something from it, it still remains whole somehow, at least in spirit, like the columns of Persepolis that Jaime Cantacuzino wrote about, when he said that You know, even if there are just some scattered columns in the present, for the spirit is enough. So I guess if a work has integrity and it was conceived and built with intensity and devotion, maybe even if some parts are removed or you know, taken away, to use the words of Helmut, they still remain mysteriously, perhaps unsurprisingly, alive. The man was not modest. Helmut was not a modest architect. Well, architects in general are not very modest. It's not their best attribute, far from it, especially the males. But he was a flamboyant, playboy-like architect. I mean, look at his posture, it's, I don't know what Lao Tzu or Lao Tse would have said of this man looking at this picture. Very elegant, of course. He was highly successful. He actually came from Germany to the United States, to Chicago, and he was employed by Murphy, an established architecture firm, and in a short time he became a partner of Murphy. And when Murphy died, Helmut became the sole owner of the firm. Here he is as a young man, as a younger man, intense and sure of himself. And drawing. In fact, there are many drawings done by him, by his hands, very, elaborate drawings. I hope I have here some drawings to show you by Helmut. He traced many little lines, and with that tenacity which the German spirit is known for. The architecture profession, this is what he wrote, has lost a lot of its integrity, especially in the United States. The general architect here has no scruples, no ambitions. Well, interesting association between these two words, scruples and the ambitions, because actually, in my opinion, many ambitious men or people arrive at having no scruples exactly because of their ambitions. But in a kind of funny way and self-contradictory, he says that there are many people, or the general architect has no scruples and no ambitions. Funny statement, why did he associate scruples with ambitions? As having none. Anyway, I will let you reflect on this. In his older age, with, of course, artificially colored hair, as even people with a lot of integrity do not hesitate to do. I don't know, we can think about it. But then if we compare his hair with the wig of Ange Gabriel, well, how much sincerity was in that wig? Although that wig was sincerely, not telling the truth, if I can say something like this. Because yes, if you wear a wig, it's clearly not your hair. While in this case, it's something different. It is his hair, I'm tempted to imagine, but a little bit colored for a more youngish look. Now look at the man here. Did he think at the time when this picture was taken of him that he would die falling from the bike at 81? Probably not. I wonder what the gods and the angels, not Ange, Jacques, Gabriel, but the angels, the real angels, thought of this picture when they saw it. This man is staring at us in undecipherable ways somehow. But one thing is for sure, he was not a modest man. Drawings by Helmut. This is how he works. I mean, I think he suffered of some kind of horror vacui. He had to cover everything. The whiteness of the page had to be busy. Again, a typical drawing by Helmut Jahn. He worked. That's the truth. I mean, just to make a little sketch like this, you have to work a little bit. But look how many sketches are here, all in the squares, of course. Yeah, he did this kind of composite drawings. He obviously liked drawing, liked architectural drawing. Again, the expression is not of modesty. You look at this scheme, you would say this man is believing in the power of architecture beyond certain limits or limitations. Now, those who think that those people in the West, they can afford to build so much and they can afford to have so much time at their disposal because they have the slaves, as somebody told me here, who do the work. Well, he did these drawings by himself with his own hand, just as Stephen Hall every day religiously makes sketches with his own hand and his own watercolors and so on. So it's not true that people in other countries have slaves who do the work for them and they don't do anything. It's not true. I mean, look at this. I mean, this graphic vibration is God. I would get tired to cover this thing with the same a little bit neurotical line. He wasn't. He was not. Anyway, interesting. On the other hand, this appetite for graphic complications. Helmutian drawings. He didn't just make some, spontaneous sketches. These are some of them, studies almost in detail. Now, we arrive at a very important building in his oeuvre, and it happened that I was inside this building. I had vertigo when I took the elevator. It's true, I was in my middle life crisis, and I didn't feel well at all in that elevator. And you are going to see the elevators. Apparently, the building went through some crisis recently. Was saved by the outrage of the people of Chicago, and I'm happy that they saved it because it's still an interesting building and it didn't deserve to be demolished. Here it is. Again, let's not expect from Helmut Jahn a modest building. This is the building, but just like in the case of John Portman, the show is inside, maybe, but outside too. It's a building, asserting itself with some power and with some desire to be noticed. But look at the interior; it's just like his drawings. And they look at the elevator. I was in one of these elevators, and again, but the problem was with me. It was nothing wrong with the elevator, nor with the space. It's just that I felt dwarfed and I felt afraid, actually. I probably suffered then of both agoraphobia and acrophobia, both of height and wide, large spaces. I like the building, I like just like in the case of John Portman, because these spaces do communicate a desire to transcend, the smallness of the individual and to achieve some kind of a public, atmosphere, if nothing else. And I think he did. the publicness of life is part of the interior of this building. Helmut Jahn in Chicago. And again, I'm happy the building was saved and was not destroyed. But we recognize, looking at the picture, that indeed between his drawings that we looked at and the pictures of the built space is not such a long distance. In other cases, of course, in architecture, the drawing has nothing to do with the built work. But I think, even these reflections, they remind one of that, as I call the neurotic line from his drawings, obsessively, rhythmical and unending. We see in these reflections something of those drawings. Interesting. And there is also some kind of impressionism because of this fragmentation in many little, lines and surfaces, and they all connect. And it's not it's such a different architecture, from what we saw in the work of the 18th century architect named Ange, Jacques Gabriel. After all, not too many centuries passed between the 18th century and the 20th century. No, a little more than 2 centuries. This is not such a big deal, really. Unfortunately, the base of the building, the pedestal of the building is rather explicitly postmodern, but what can you do? It was affected by that international illness we call postmodernism. But there is a certain idealism here, the building has a certain utopian quality, I would say. And we need that, I think. We need that. Life without any kind of longing or dreaming becomes depressing. I wonder what Boulez and Ledoux would have thought of this building. They probably would have been envious, But okay, so the Thompson Center in Chicago by Helmut Jahn. I think Murphy lived then at that time, if I'm not mistaken, his partner, and actually the one who founded the firm where later Helmut Jahn was employed and where later Helmut Jahn became a partner. If I remember correctly, I think Helmut Jahn didn't quite finish his studies. Not very sure, maybe in Germany, but in the United States, I think he started to study for a while and then he gave up, and he didn't need to. Obviously he had enough success without, the need for, excessive study in a school. Now, the Sony Center in Berlin, and as I mentioned, we had with us last year, Bruce Denzinger, the engineer who actually worked with Helmut Jahn on this building. And he explained to us why structurally this was not the best, outcome. I wish he was here with us today to explain us further, so I would understand finally. But I understand in a way aesthetically. This was important indeed. All this roofing, all this structure. It's easy for me to speculate aesthetically about this, but imagine this being done without the engineer. It would have been impossible. So the engineer was crucial here. Maybe even more than the architect. So I think we have to acknowledge and have affection for the engineers who make the things possible. Because, okay, you can make a seductive drawing with colors or not, but how do you build it? That's another question. So yes, I understood Bruce Danziger told us that this was not the best outcome for this important part of the structure of this roofing. Now, the architect for this building was from the outside, the building is not so spectacular. What is spectacular is the atrium. There are all kinds of spectacular buildings around here built by Sir Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano and Arata Isozaki and others. But this building was built by Helmut Jahn. So he was working at home now. I mean, he was born in Germany, and here he is, you know, crossing the ocean backwards, returning to his country of birth, Germany. Here you see that roofing in between these buildings. I love the trees. But, you know, we have to confess, you know, the trees made by God have their splendor and have their beauty, but also the ingenuity of the human people, the humans, you know, doing all these things, some of them more extravagant. They need probably some appreciation too. Maybe without probably. Yes, there was used calculation, engineering, premeditation, planning, materials, funds, but the aesthetical side of the work was not forgotten. Now, you know, maybe this was not the best solution arrived at, but all in all, there was a concern with you know, with beauty as well. The difficulty also had to do with the fact that this is not a circle, it's an ellipse. And these complicated matters, you can see it here in the top view, view from the top. I mean, it's much easier to craft something like this than what is here. So this is the Sony Center, architect Helmut Jahn in Berlin, Potsdamer Platz. I can only say the engineer, the structural engineer of such a, you know, for me, complicated roofing can only be brilliant. I mean, how else could I put it? Here is the, you know, the sketch, the drawing by Helmut Jahn. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. Unless you want to say something. Thank you. I appreciate. Just like the Thompson Center, you know, the inner space is the one that matters truly, because the building from the outside is not really impressive, but inside this atrium, this you know, inner space is the one that architecturally, and not just architecturally, socially matters. Now, a building in Frankfurt, in Germany, the Messturm or Trade Fair Tower is a 63-story, 257 meters skyscraper in the western Süd district of Frankfurt, Germany. It is the second tallest building in Frankfurt, the second tallest building in Germany, and the second tallest building in the European Union. My God, you know, the second 3 times. It was the tallest building in Europe from its completion in 1991 until 1997, when it was surpassed by the Commerzbank Tower, which is also located in Frankfurt. So here it is. Tall it is, even if it's the second, but to be the second in terms of height is not such a little thing, even for Europe. Although we cannot compare ourselves, of course, with other countries or continents, but Europe is not famous for its skyscrapers, really. This building is indeed a sky-scratching building. Too bad again that the exterior is clearly affected by the pathology of what we call the postmodernism. It is a phallic building, let's put it simply. But this doesn't come as a surprise if we remember the initial pictures of Mr. Helmut Jahn. In my opinion, the exterior of this building is rather commercial and you know, in a bothering way. But that was the time. Let's blame the time. I mean, for most cities in the world, just this pinnacle, just this top part would have meant. I mean, just this part would have meant a lot for most cities, but this is just an almost insignificant part at the top of the building. Now we cross back the ocean to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Liberty Place. He built here several buildings. So let's read. Liberty Place is a skyscraper complex. Attention, not a building, a complex in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States. The complex is composed of a 61-story 945 foot, that is 288 meters, skyscraper called One Liberty Place, a 58-story, 258 meter skyscraper called Two Liberty Place, and 2-story shopping mall, my God, from, 61 stories to 2 stories, shopping mall called the Shops at Liberty Place, and the 14-story Westin Philadelphia Hotel. So we have shopping, we have a hotel, and then we have probably office buildings. What else should there be in those two sky-scratching buildings? Here they are. And I think, although these were affected by postmodernists too, but a certain reference to Chrysler Building in New York is perhaps not the most irritating one. Yeah, why not? Why not? Although, maybe I could move beyond the superficiality of why not. Maybe, but look at the buildings of other times, of older times, but not too old. We are still in the brave new world. And look at the new ones. I mean, by now they are not so new any longer. But at that time, there is a distance now. The world became more and more fond of height and of bigness. I'm sure that these buildings in Philadelphia, when they were built, they were considered big and tall, but look at what's looming behind, and this is, what is 61 stories? What do they mean in today's world? Nothing if we contemplate the giants in the Arab world or Southeast Asia or China and so on. The world is still obsessed by quantity. The higher, the better. The bigger, the better. Bigness. Now, big. Bjarke Ingels. OMA, now Office of Metropolitan Architecture. Now, the bigger, the better. you know, and we see here some reflections of that mentality. Look at them. They are triumphantly ignoring what's here at the base. You know, they are asserting themselves with big chests, the chest of pride of the architect and the financial powers behind him. Now, an airport in Thailand, uh, and an airport it is indeed. I mean, you look at this plan and you look at those minuscule planes and you realize the scale of this building, you know. I mean, those planes look like insects on this site plan, you know. They are planes, right? Imagine, I don't know how many people inside each plane. You know, it's incredible, this huge parking for planes. It's a good building in a way, but anyway, the pandemic is suggesting to us to curb a little bit our expansions, because you know, I don't even know how these airports and these airlines you know, meet their ends financially with this pandemic. They are probably crippled, you know. People don't travel so much any longer. I mean, people still do. That's why the pandemic is not over, and then run new cases all the time, increasingly so lately, exactly because people can't stand in one room, as Pascal asked us to do, you know. We just can't, you know. We'd rather die than stand still in a room. No. It's a huge building, yes. What can we say? It might not be so huge any longer, but it is, of course. It's just that there is a competition, a strong competition from other countries, you know, like China, where Zaha Hadid Architects built, just completed, you know, a giant airport. I really don't know how these airports survive, you know, with having some, well, less abundant travel, less people traveling. How do they survive? They probably receive help from the governments, otherwise they would collapse financially. Yeah, well, this kind of work, Helmut Jahn was very good at. This was not the work of a Hamletian, you know, mental disposition. No, I don't think Helmut Jahn had the doubts which tormented the Danish prince. No, you cannot build something like this with a trembling hand or with doubts. You have to have convictions. Without convictions, you cannot build this thing. Look at this. You know, can you imagine how much money was spent to build this airport? The new Bangkok International Airport. It's a good work, but in my opinion, a little bit excessively optimistic. But I guess architecture is indeed, yes. How else could you build like this? You know, how could an architect build if in between a significant number of assertions, yes, finds room a trembling no? I wonder. Here we have touches of, you know, tradition, so to speak. An interesting show within the airport, which of course would seduce the travelers. Bangkok. The seduction of exoticism is still a reality. And I think the airport is, you know, a success. If by success we mean, you know, visual interest, colorfulness, interesting volumes, interesting spaces. It's is a masculinist architectural gesture, but it has also curves, and curves are associated with the opposite of masculinism. I don't know how successfully so, but I think it's a good airport. Now we arrive at the last work which I show today. A tower he built in New York City, and is one of his last works. Of course, it had to be a tower. It's 50 on West Street in New York City. And I don't think I have to tell you which building of these many buildings is his. Of course, it had to be this one. It's without saying. It is. This is by Helmut, and it was built about 5-6 years ago. Please remember, he died last year while he was biking at 81, and this is the tower he built at 50 West in New York City. No less asserting, of course. As far as I imagine, no window here ever opens. It all depends on artificially pumped air, not very sustainable at all. These windows here you can open. Any of these windows you can open, but not here. This is a building which, without artificially created and pumped air, it cannot survive. At night, here we see the new World Trade Center, the one that replaced the fallen towers. This one, the designer was David Charles from SOM, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. Reflections, a lot of reflections, and a lot of, can you imagine how much electrical energy this building consumes? And it's just one building between so many. Manhattan is filled with such towers. Can you imagine how much electricity is being consumed? It's not just the light, I mean, the artificial light, the electrical light, but also, the climatization of the building. And then, we complain or we are stunned that the icebergs are melting and the levels of the sea is rising and so on. We shouldn't be surprised. This is just one single building in Manhattan, but there are many Manhattans now in the world and many towers like this one in any of them. Yes, it is impressive. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what Ange Jacques Gabriel would have thought of this tower. He probably would have thought he was dreaming or something, or having a nightmare. I can't imagine Ange Jacques Gabriel, who had behind him a king, let's not forget, Louis XV. I can't imagine him, envisioning such a build. And just 2 centuries, a little bit more than 2 centuries later, here it is, a German architect in the United States building it. Here we see his building, this one, and David Charles, the World Trade Center, and some kind of a dialogue, if you want, in this picture. And here again, standing out, and it does stand out quite obviously. Any of the buildings around it at the time when they were built with the same aplomb and the same desire for verticality that characterizes not just Manhattan and New York City, but many parts of the brave new world. And here it is, higher and higher, going taller and taller, and shinier in the light of the sunset. Helmut Jahn in Manhattan. So let's wish him happy birthday, and we can only say that we are sorry that he died as he died. Thank you.